Okay, so for those that have not been keeping up, the Mystical Archives are a 63 card group of cards that will be distributed in Strixhaven booster packs that contain cards for Magic's history, which makes them a perfect addition to Magic Arena's historic format. So they are all instants and sorceries, and there are 63 different ones, and 56 of them will be legal and historic on Magic Arena. All 63 of them will be coming to the platform, so that way limited on Magic Arena is the same as limited on limited in paper. I'm not going to be commenting on the power level or whether or not I think the ones that aren't legal should be legal or whatnot. I think that's a whole can of worms I don't really want to get into. The goal for this segment here today is to talk about the ones that are legal and give some perspective from my opinion on whether or not I think these cards will fit into the format and what I think they could maybe fit into before we get to start playing games with them. If you're as excited as I am to play games with these cards, the next Hoaglandia Open is slated for April 17th. That's 2 days after the set releases on Magic Arena, and we've changed that to be historic because honestly, I'm expecting these Mystical Archives to make historic more different than the standard set's going to make standard. I think standard's probably still going to be a lot of ultimatum and adventures, and I think these new powerful instant sorceries are going to shake things up to say the least. So let's just jump right into it. To start, I'm gonna start with the big one, huh? I'm gonna run down my top 5 here to start and talk through what I think about them and why. And this is easily I'm not going to talk about the cards that they chose not to include in historic, the 7 that are not legal. I will say that I feel like of the 56 cards that are being added to the format, I guess not all 50, but of the cards that are being added, some of them are already standard legal, already historic legal, so it's technically not 56 new cards. It's a lot of new cards, though. This is probably the only one I think that concerns me the most. So, Faithless Looting has a pedigree. You can see here, it's currently banned in Modern. And not only is this an incredibly powerful card, but this is a powerful card that slots into an existing established archetype in Historic. So the red-black Croxa Arcanist Pyromancer deck, that Lurish Shell, is already good and established in Historic, and this card slots very easily into it. If you haven't played with this card before, not only is this card great at enabling graveyard synergies to the draws 2 and discards 2, but this card's just great in fair mid-range decks because it provides you card selection to kind of mitigate that flood and screw as the game goes long. The flashback especially is what makes it powerful because, in the mid to late game, you're able to pay 3 and possibly turn 2 lands into 2 spells, which is just very powerful smoothing. And in Modern, before this card was banned, it had kind of a brainstorm from Legacy Effect where a lot of decks were just playing it because this was the best card selection that was legal in the format. In addition to slotting into the Pyromancer Dreadhorde Arcanist deck that's obviously already reasonable, I think there's a good chance this makes the Red Phoenix deck more competitive. I think that's an easy call. Like we've seen that deck in Modern abuse this card when this card was legal, so I think we'll easily see that come in. Pemberton, thanks for the brand new Prime support. I really appreciate that. And Chloe the Comrade and Cardinal, thanks for re-upping. Welcome back. Metal God, I think I missed you a few minutes ago. Welcome back as well. So yeah, this art is real, by the way. When they spoiled this the other day, we thought maybe it was a joke and someone had bad photoshopped a card we couldn't believe, but this art is confirmed real. All of the cards I'm talking about here are confirmed by Wizards of the Coast coming to Historic. So every card I talk about here, this is not speculation. These cards are guaranteed to be historic legal when they release on April 15th. You'll be able to get them in Magic Arena Strixhaven booster packs on April 15th. All right, moving along. I think it's easy to say, while there's some speculation in videos like this, I think it's easy to say that this card will easily be playable in Historic, and it's going to make existing decks better, and it will probably make decks like Blue-Red Phoenix that haven't quite been competitive enough fully competitive. So this is definitely a card. This is definitely a card that you should expect to see play. Next up, easy call. Expect to see play. Inquisition of Kozilek. So target player reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it with converted mana cost 3 or less. That player discards this card. Again, for people that don't know their history, Thoughtseize and Inquisition are legal in Modern together, and usually we see black mid-range decks play both of these cards. Depending on what your deck is looking to do, how aggressive it is, we generally see decks play 6 to 8 main deck copies, usually with the full 8 in the 75. And which one you favor in the main deck can depend on a few things, like how aggressive the format is or how important it is to tag more expensive things. I expect Thoughtseize to be better than Inquisition if Historic remains how it is right now. However, we're getting this big injection of cards, and I could see Historic changing to a point where maybe you want Inquisition main because your life total matters more as opposed to having the extra Thoughtseize in the board. So it's really going to depend on, how many, Teferi Hero of Dominarias and big expensive cards do we care about taking. And again, people pointing out in chat very intelligently, this is another card that slots into the red-black Arcanist deck. So, yeah, I know the cards aren't English. A couple of these spoilers aren't English. The English text is right here in the middle for people at home. You should be able to read that one there. I'm just going to go ahead and leave them up here in the language that they are. So this card will easily see play in a bunch of things. Most black mid-range decks are going to want to play more copies. This and Faithless. Honestly, with Faithless Looting and this, these are both cards that don't go into the Jund Food deck, that do go into the Arcanist deck. So, like, the Arcanist deck has felt like it's really close even now, and I think with both of these additions, I think even if we don't see anything banned from the Jund deck, we're going to have some real contention for, like, what's the best deck in the format. All right, my next card. I think the first 5 cards I'm going to go over here from these new cards, I think these are cards that are almost assuredly going to see play, and the rest of them are varying degrees of neat and could see play. So the next card of the 5 that I think are guaranteed to see play in Historic is Abundant Harvest. I love the design of this card. Choose land or non-land, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. Put that card into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in order. This card feels like what Once Upon a Time should have been. Yeah. This card feels like, oh, we messed up with Once Upon a Time. We wanted green to have some added consistency with something like Once Upon a Time. This is a way to fix that. So this is a brand new card. I believe they said this is a card that's going to be in Modern Horizons 2 later this year. So this card will eventually be legal in Modern, but when it comes out in Strixhaven, it's going to be legal in Historic, Legacy, and Vintage to start. And then when it gets printed in Modern Horizons 2, it's a preprint is a good way to put it. And I'm really glad they preprinted this. I think this is a sweet addition to Historic. I think most green decks are probably going to want to play 4 copies of these. What will likely end up happening is, like, you figure out how many lands and how many spells you want your deck to have, and then you, like, cut 2 lands, cut 2 spells, and play 4 of these. So it's just gonna add a good bit of consistency to green decks in the format. And honestly, this is why it's hard to say this is guaranteed to good or not. It's easy I think it's safe to say, something like Faithless Looting, I'm weary of this and wouldn't be surprised if it breaks things, but this isn't the only powerful card selection card we're getting in the format. While obviously we haven't seen this card in action yet, this card feels powerful in a slightly different way than Faithless Looting is powerful. So what we're seeing in these spells is almost every color is getting powerful tools to smooth out the draws that you're going to have when you play Magic and add consistency, right? Yeah, so like both Harvest and Looting, and obviously Looting is powerful in a different way that Harvest isn't powerful, but they both are going to add an incredible amount of consistency to the decks that play them, which is a neat thing to be seeing. And that reduced deck building. So it does, and I think that's an important thing to address. A card like this does reduce deck building variety in a way, in that I would be very surprised once this card is legal, that it's ever correct to not have 4 of these in your deck if your deck makes green mana consistently. So that is something to think about. So like, if your deck is green and historic, you probably are wrong if you're not playing 4 of these cards, I would guess. Normally I stay away from strong statements like that, but this is a 1 mana cantrip. Yeah, it's similar to Once Upon a Time, but on a lower power level because the first one's not free. So it does, I agree, reduce deck building variety in that green decks in Historic are likely 71 cards now. And obviously, there's some consideration here as well, because, for example, a balance you're going to have to find is, okay, I'm playing a Collected Company deck, right? So, like, there could be a good argument to say, okay, adding Abundant Harvest to my Collected Company deck isn't okay because I'm giving up creature slots to play Abundant Harvest. So maybe it's wrong to say it probably is wrong to say that you strictly have to be playing 4 of these. I wouldn't be surprised if most of them end up at 4 of these, but it's not straightforward in that you're guaranteed to want to do this or this to start because, there are other deck building considerations like Collected Company to think about. That being said, again, this is one of the 5 cards I think is almost guaranteed to see play and be reasonable in Historic. Cheap cards like this are super reasonable. It does not tutor Coco. Choose land or non-land reveal cards. You choose spell or non-spell with this. You're not guaranteed. You can get a creature with this. All right, next up, Lightning Helix. This is a fantastic addition to the format. It is a card that aggressive decks can use as reach. It is a card that control decks and mid-range decks can use to stabilize against aggro, and those decks can use this card as reach against control. So there's a lot of value in removal spells that have a text box against control decks. And this is a card like that. This is a card that is a phenomenal mid-range tool because it is a card that mid-range is a static to draw against aggro, and it's not a blank against control. So I think this is an excellent addition to the format. It's almost assuredly going to see plenty of play. At the Mythic Championship going on this weekend, we saw some people porting Bring to Light Niv from, Pioneer and Modern. We've seen that archetype. This is a powerful, well, we don't have Bring to Light in Historic yet. This is a card that you could find with 5-color Niv, which is very, very reasonable. So I expect this to be a staple in red-white decks, and I think it's a good enough tool that we could see this create red-white, either control or mid-range decks that previously weren't competitive enough. Next up, from cards almost assuredly going to see play, Memory Lapse. Counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it on top of its owner's library instead of in that player's graveyard. Even if you've never played with this card before, you've probably been Aether Gusted if you've played Magic in the last couple of years. And while obviously this card doesn't impact the board, it's very powerful. And like, just to give you a comparison of what happens, yeah, this is a card that feels bad to play against. I'm honestly kind of surprised they included this one. I would have definitely preferred Remand over Memory Lapse, but this is what we've got, so that's a different can of worms. Let's not get into it. But this card, imagine you're in the late game and your opponent top decks a thing and you Memory Lapse them. This card is basically Time Walk in the late game. It's basically Time Walk in the late game. It's something. I expect this will be a reasonable card in combo decks and tempo decks. I don't believe we have clarity on that, Quaza. Obviously, they thought about it a little bit. They could have banned this card if they didn't want it in the format, but they very clearly want this card in the format. Mana Leak or Remand. I personally would have preferred either of those, but this is what we got. It's going to be interesting. It's been a long time since I played with this card. This card is not Modern legal. It's only Legacy and Pauper legal currently, so Yeah, I mean, Justin, you love miserable things. This card is miserable. I promise you, if you've not played against this card, it's pretty miserable. It's a strong card that will almost assuredly see play. Someone now past these first five, all of the other cards that I've got pulled up. You see, I got a lot of browser tabs up here. Are all cards that could see varying play under the right circumstances. It'll be neat to figure out what goes where. Starting with, I think the card most people are excited about, which is Mind's Desire. So shuffle your library, then exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. This has Storm, which for the Magic Zoomers out there means you get to recast this card an additional time for every other time that you played a spell this turn. And chat, this card is banned in Legacy, and it's restricted in Vintage. And that's why people are kind of freaking out about this card. Now, something that is very, very important is that Historic does not have Moxes outside of Moxamber. Historic does not have Dark Rituals. Historic does not have free mana, generally speaking. So cards like this are very broken with free mana cards. And Historic, by and large, is free of those kinds of effects. Yeah, the Emery Paradox, yeah, there's no Manamorphose. Like, it's just banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage because this card has so many powerful enabling cards in those sets. And now, one of the things that is powerful about this card is that you're casting the copies of things that you hit with it. So what that means is if you Mind's Desire for, say you Mind's Desire for 4, and you run a little bit hot on your Mind's Desire for 4, and your Mind's Desire for 4 hits a second Mind's Desire out of your deck. Now, your second Mind's Desire that you've hit probably storms for 6, 7, or 8, and then that Mind's Desire for 6, 7, or 8 is likely to hit your third Mind's Desire. So the reason why a card like this is potentially powerful is because once you start, it snowballs hard. And honestly, a card like this is sweet. Like this card creates some esports moments. It creates some wild board states that are kind of neat and interesting, where you're like, I didn't find what I needed to kill my opponent, but I got to cast some stuff and other things like that. So yeah. So this one, I'm excited to build around this card. Contrary to what a lot of people think, I don't think it's guaranteed that this card breaks the format because of the context of the cards surrounding it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's powerful. I wouldn't be surprised if it's good. But like, take for example, someone saying Sultai Ultimatum gets this card. Why would Sultai Ultimatum want to take this card that gives you 2 or 3 random spells out of your deck when you cast Ultimatum, rather than guaranteed trying to get things that do stuff for you? The power of the Sultai Ultimatum deck is you know what you're getting and your opponent's going to lose regardless. Adding this variance element to Mind's Desire isn't very exciting. And actually, someone just mentioned a card. Is that card not on the spoiler, or did I miss it? Sorted this. Someone mentioned Time Warp with what's it called? And I didn't have that pulled up. Is Time Warp not listed here? Or did I just miss it? Wow. It's just not here, right? All right, another card. I apologize. I'm not used to Scryfall. I'm not used to Scryfall being bad. Okay, maybe I got to do an extra take and see it, make sure I didn't miss anything else. But this card's going to be great too. This card is good in the Sultai Ultimatum deck. Honestly, this card could maybe be a 6 card that I think is pretty likely to see play. Skyfall does not only have the English image. That's just wrong. We literally looked at foreign language cards already. So target player takes 1 extra turn after this one for 5 mana. So the big thing that this card does, and does 2 big things for the format. The first is that this is a take extra turn spell that does not exile itself when you cast it. This means things like Tameo and other things like that, while Nexus of Fate is a self-enabling card, you're going to have to work for it. Time Warp gives us the possibility of I'm taking every turn for the rest of the game being a deck in Historic. And now, while I know that that's tedious to play against, it is important to understand as well that, like, the pedigree in Modern for that type of deck is not good. So while, again, there's something to work with and think about there, I think anybody telling you they're guaranteed for this deck to be good or anything like that, I think it's far too early for that. This is something you're gonna have to work on. Now, something else this card does for the format is that a second take an extra turn card being introduced to Historic means that Sultai Ultimatum in Historic is guaranteed to take an extra turn when they cast Sultai Ultimatum if they want it. So you'll get Aldrin's Epiphany, Time Warp, third spell, and you're either getting 2 extra turns or you're getting 1 extra turn plus whatever good spell you want with it. So again, gonna need to see and play through, hey, is this actually good? But, you know, it might be. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. Unsure if you can hear the children in the background, but I'm gonna go ahead and close the door just in case. Sure, yeah, you get Time Warp, Aldrin's Epiphany, and Omniscience, and like they don't want to give you Omniscience, probably, right? Like, almost assuredly correct. Mind's Desire, Mana Tither, Mana Tithes, chat. Listen, if you haven't been Mana Tithed before, let me tell you about an infuriating experience. Mana Tithe, chat, in an open deck list tournament. This is the best 2 of you can put in your deck, because the cost of representing this card, of leaving 1 mana up, is low, and the payoff is potentially very high. And let me tell you, chat, a whole new generation of Magic player is about to learn about the post-Mana Tithe land drop of shame. And I don't care how good of a Magic player you are, at some point, if you are playing in a format where this card is legal, you're going to have a post-Mana Tithe land drop of shame. Don't hold your land, chat. Put your land into play. It's okay. Let your opponent know that you messed up. But play your lands before you cast your spells. You're going to forget that at some point, but it happens to the best of us. Just, you know, don't. Oh, yeah. You don't play your land and you cast your Mox Diamond on one and you get your Mox Diamond dazed, and it's just like, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? Listen, chat, I've made post-daze land drops a shame in more than I can count, okay? It happens to the best of us. This effect is probably going to be sweet in White Weenie aggro. Thalia's a card I've really been underwhelmed by in Historic as a whole, and I think that this card in those small white creature aggro decks is probably going to be really sweet. So I think this one's probably playable in some amount, and it's going to feel good to get people with it, and it's going to feel a little bit bad to get punked out by. Next up, Sign in Blood. We were actually talking about Night's Whisper, which I think is actually often a worse version of this on stream, wishing it wasn't Historic before the archive started happening. And I love this addition to the format. Just good, solid card advantage spell. We played some Black Devotion on stream. That deck would love this kind of like card advantage effect. And notably, this is target player. You play enough 4X Sign in Blood decks, you are eventually going to kill your opponent at some point with the Sign in Blood. It's going to feel great, especially because most decks that play Sign in Blood don't have reach in them. Yeah, this will be sweet. Death Shadow is legal and historic. This is a card that probably pairs with Death Shadow very well. Helps you lose life, generates some card advantage. Yeah, this card's very. I expect this card will probably see some amount of play. I don't think that this card's strong enough to make like a new tier 1 deck, but I think like there's a lot of like B-list decks like Black Devotion that will really love this card, and I think this card slots elegantly into a lot of decks that like aren't quite good enough but will appreciate a power boost from this, and that people are going to enjoy casting the spell. Stone Rain. If you had me pick the worst card that people will register in large numbers from the Mystical Archive, this is it. I expect a lot of people to unreasonably casting this card, and they're going to lose lots of games casting it, but it won't matter because those people are going to get to blow up lands, and the people that want to blow up lands are going to do what they want to do, and that's it. Listen, chat. When I take deck submissions, the number one thing that I do in viewer deck submissions is cut 1 to 2 spells and add more lands. Put more lands in your Magic decks. We have so many good utility lands and modal double face lands. However many lands you think your deck needs, add 2. Just like you think you need 24, play 26. You think you need 26, play 28. You think you need 28, play 30. Play 30 lands in your control deck, chat. Play 30 lands with 10 or 12 utility lands. You think before it later. You know, we played what's the card? Was that Sawtusk? Is that it? Sawtusk is the Dorko? Yeah, Sawtusk Demolisher. This was in the last Historic Anthology. We're gonna play some red-green Panza on stream for sure. This card destroys any non-creature permanent, chat. We're gonna Sawtusk some lands. We're gonna Stone Rain some lands. Goblin Rune Blaster. It's a card. Yeah, this card's historic legal. This destroys non-basic lands, which there are plenty of in historic. So like red-green Panza is coming soon to a historic queue near you. Okay, chat? It's coming soon to a historic queue near you. Put some more lands in your deck. I would kind of be surprised if Stone Rain is competitive, but it's a fun, obnoxious effect that people love, so I expect it to see play regardless. Mizzix Mastery. You want my bold, hot take from the Mystical Archives? I think this card is better than a lot of people are going to give it credit for. I think there's a good chance that this is the best Storm enabler in Historic. In addition to Mind's Desire, we're going to hit on them later. We also got Tendrils of Agony and Grape Shot in Historic. So this card is Overload. So 4 mana, exile target card that's instant sorcery from your graveyard. You may cast that spell without paying its mana cost. Overload changes target to each. So for 8 mana, you get to recast every instant and sorcery spell in your graveyard, and you are casting those spells out of your graveyard, which means you trigger Storm on them. So if you have Mind's Desire and 4 other sorceries in your graveyard, and you overload Mizzix Mastery, you're going to get a Mind's Desire with Storm equal to 5, and you're going to cast 6 Mind's Desire. This card. It's a shame this doesn't work well with Ironcrag Feet. I mean, it does though, right? Like, Ironcrag Feet's actually a great call-out. Obviously, Ironcrag Feet doesn't cast this on its own. Ironcrag Feet does get you 7 of the 8, right? Another thing to note, though, is this card costs 8 mana, but you also need a packed graveyard for it to be good, right? So there's a chance that you don't even need really much mana cheating for this card, because by the time it's good, the game's probably gone a little long. Oh, Ironcrag Feet stops you from casting the spells. Oh, you're super right. That's a good call. Ironcrag Feet stops you from casting spells. That's a good observation. All right, scratch Ironcrag Feet. That's fine. Like I said, it probably isn't very good anyways, because you probably have mana. All right. Weather the Storm. Speaking of, Storm card, gain 3 life. I think this card will probably see some amount of play as an anti-aggro card. I think we're probably going to play this card with Veto So veto, if you're not familiar, says every time you gain life, your opponent loses that much life. So veto lets you turn this card into kind of a 2-mana bigger tendrils. And notably, something we've seen before, Bolas's Citadel. I probably just typed that wrong. Like, yeah, close enough. Bolas's Citadel is a sweet card with that Storm card because you like kind of churn through your deck, and then your life is letting you cast spells. So you get to like cast that, gas up, and you pair this with something that lets you either scry or surveil the top of your deck. And this seems like a sweet enabler for potentially, the Explore Storm deck. Yeah. Seems like a neat way to approach that. Brainstorm. I've seen a lot of blistering takes on Brainstorm in Historic, and the thing that if you can walk away from this video with one takeaway, it is please remember that the power level of cards is contextual to the format in which they're being played. I posted a screenshot. I'm not gonna say who the Twitter thing was from, but I saw a tweet that summed up the. Thank you for the bit slam. Then I'd be happy to get that added to the queue. That's something that summed up discourse around Brainstorm in Historic, which is the tweet said, "We literally have Fabled Passage and Prismatic Vista in Historic. Brainstorm's gonna be good." And for those that aren't familiar with why that statement is funny, is this card is not Historic legal. So just like peak Magic discourse is with this definitely good because of this thing that's objectively not true. And my take on Brainstorm is that I would be surprised if this card is not playable. So I expect this card to be playable in Historic. However, I would also be surprised if Brainstorm is busted. So while Fabled Passage and bad fetches like Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds are legal, I think there's going to be enough shuffle effects and incidental clears that this card's very playable in Historic. So I would be surprised if it's worth playing Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse. You'll definitely want your 4 Fabled Passages, but I think leaning into cards like Search for Azcanta, Tameo, blue-green Tameo pluses to clear a Brainstorm off the top of your deck. Maybe you play, blue-white control. You have more of a reason to play Birth of Metellus as a 2-drop. Sure, you play more copies of Field of Rune in your deck. So, I think we'll see more copies of cards that were, close to being good, but not quite, that also shuffle as being good with this card. Yeah, a couple of people in chat, this card is a sweet combo enabler with Kefnet God Eternal, right? Reveal the first card you draw each turn when you draw it. If you reveal an instant sorcery, you get to cast that, copy that spell, and cast it for 2 less. This is a powerful effect. Brainstorm lets you set up God Eternal Kefnet triggers for the next turn. And more importantly, Brainstorm's an instant. So Brainstorm lets you trigger God Eternal Kefnet on your opponent's turn if you just have a good instant or sorcery on top of your deck. Someone mentioned Tybalt's Trickery. So Tybalt's Trickery mills you at random to prevent Brainstorm from setting it up explicitly. That being said, something I didn't mention earlier is this card's probably really funny in Tybalt's Trickery, chat. This card with Tybalt's Trickery, you hit it and you have Storm at least 3. So I'm excited to Trickery people with this card too. I forgot to mention that when we were talking about it. So Brainstorm's not good with Trickery, but Trickery's good with Mind's Desire, which is hilarious. All right, moving along. So at this point, these cards that I talked about, these are the heavy hitters. These are the ones that I expect will see some amount of play in Historic, whether they're in new tier 1 decks or propping up support decks. These cards are all cards that we've gone over so far in the first half hour that I expect to see play. And remember, if you're just dropping in now and you weren't here for the start of the review, it'll all be up in a segment on my YouTube channel tonight. And if you're watching this on YouTube in the future, hello, thanks for watching. Next up, now there's another selection of cards here that I think are potentially still playable in the right shells, but I don't really expect them to be overbearing, and I also wouldn't be surprised if they don't pop up right away. This card's sweet. I've often said formats, something I've said before about Modern is that formats of Magic that are worth playing, Electrolyze is playable in. And that's a strong statement, but it kind of encapsulates where I personally enjoy formats being in terms of power level. So this is a card that's very contextual in whether or not it can be playable. That being said, we talked about Faithless Looting and Inquisition, and if Faithless Looting and Inquisition enable Young Pyromancer to be a tiered deck in this format, Electrolyze's stock goes up because of a threat like Young Pyromancer being in the format, right? And the most important thing about this is it draws a card, right? So like if the format is in a place where you can afford to spend 3 mana to draw a card, you get a little bit of value out of that. So you kill a 1 or 2 drop, you draw a card, you kill a Pyromancer and a token, you draw a card. Yeah, maybe something like Blue-Red Alliance. Yeah, so this is a card that I hope is playable. I will spend some time casting it, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the format ends in a spot where this card's just not good enough. But I would expect this card to get tried out. Ephemerate. Exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Rebound. You get to recast this card during your next upkeep. So this is another card that I could kind of see going either way on. If you've got good enter the battlefield value cards in the format that you want to be blinking, this seems playable. We talked about Veto earlier. Thragtusk is legal in this format. So you can technically ephemerate Thragtusk. This card single-handedly broke Pauper. Yeah, it's very good if that's what they do. It's instant speed protection as well. Remember that if a card changes zones in Magic, it counts as a new instance of that card. So if your opponent goes to Doomblade your creature and you ephemerate it, it blinks and comes back, and then it doesn't die to the Doomblade. Worth noting, some people naming Skyclave Apparition. This card works very well with that because these are separate clauses. So if you Skyclave and you ephemerate it in response to its first trigger, you'll get to blink this, exile 2 things, and not give your opponent a token from the first one. So, yeah, again, this is a card that, what cards are good in the format will dictate whether or not this is potentially good enough. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone finds a good home for this one. All right, next up on sweet cards that may or may not see play. Blue Sun's Zenith. Kind of a sweet control card. Something that's subtle about this card that may not be obvious is that this card is a win condition. This card says target player draws X cards. And notably, this shuffles itself back into your deck chat. You have a control deck. You have a control deck that let's not abuse the people that don't have Mod Swords, please and thank you. You have a control deck that just has all of the answers. This is a piece of card advantage that also can target your opponent to deck them, and it keeps you from decking. So I don't know that I expect this card to be good, but I expect people to play an unreasonable amount of it when it first comes out. This is probably similar to Stone Rain, in that people are going to cast it, but it probably won't be very good. Chaos Warp. This card is sweet. So obviously, this is a very variance-fueled card, but more importantly, this is a way for a mono red deck to answer any permanent type theoretically. And we've seen Big Red post some results in this format in Historic already. And, just being able to buy yourself tempo where, just think about it. There's a good chance that your opponent's going to get a land when you Chaos Warp them, right? So, you're 40% to turn your opponent's bomb into a land. You're 40% to turn you're some percentage to take their bomb and just make them draw a card. Oh wait, if it's a permanent they put it on the battlefield, they don't even draw it. If it's an instant or sorcery, yeah, you do this against an instant, you hit an instant or sorcery, they get nothing. Come back next turn, right? So there's probably 50+% of the time you Chaos Warp, you're turning your opponent's bomb into something that's not too scary. Thanks for the resubs, Kurt, Corgi, and Student. Welcome back. This card is reasonable. Yeah, in a pinch, you can also use this as a Hail Mary play too, right? This is target permanent, so my out is Ugin. Okay, I'm gonna Chaos Warp my land and try and spike one of my 4 Ugins. I'm gonna Chaos Warp my land and try and spike an Ugin or a 6-mana Chandra to sweep the board. So yeah, you can. This targets lands. You can stone rain control. This does not work well with Brainstorm. You shuffle your library, so not synergistic with Brainstorm, notably, but still very very good card. Expected to see play. Honestly, even if you don't want to main deck this card, depending on your deck, this is a decent sideboard card just because it targets any permanent type. Crux of Fate. I don't know if whoever decided to put this card in this anthology watches my stream, but frequently over the last year or so, every time someone's brought up Damnation in Historic, I've mentioned that I would prefer this card as a black sweeper instead of Damnation, and I'm really glad to see this addition to the format. Not only does this let Grixis curve 4-mana Nicol Bolas into Crux of Fate, kill my opponent's board, my 4-mana Nicol Bolas. Listen, chat. We'll never run out of terrible Grixis decks to play. But I think 5 mana is kind of a healthier spot for sweepers that kill everything to be. I'm not a huge fan of Wrath of God and Day of Judgment like we're gonna get to in a second. I think that's the next one. Yeah, but I like this edition. I like that it works well with 4-mana Bolas. This one I expect to see play in a lot of B-list control decks that don't have access to white. Day of Judgment. I am excited. And by excited, I mean I'm really annoyed that for the next forever, I'm going to have to explain to viewers in chat that I'm playing 2 Day of Judgment and 2 Wrath of God because Meddling Mage is technically legal in the format, nothing regenerates, and it's optimal to play a split of them in case your opponent has Meddling Mage. So, until we get something that regenerates into Historic, you should probably be playing 2 Wrath of God and 2 Day of Judgment, unless you're playing something like Tamiyo. Yeah, you could technically play more than 4 4-mana sweepers. Like, we played Bantorian, and we were playing Shatter the Skies as an additional 4-mana sweeper in that deck, so we wanted more than 4 4-mana sweepers in our 80-card deck. And sure, Day of Judgment's a great upgrade there. So, yeah, Day of Judgment, Wrath of God, whatever, it's about the same. For the Magic Zoomers out there wondering what Regenerate is, it's what we did before we had Indestructible, and Indestructible is much better. Much better. Much less confusing mechanic. You want to know what Regeneration does? Google it. Increasing Vengeance. Another kind of sweet Timmy combo build-around card. Copy target instant sorcery spell you control. The spell was cast from the graveyard. Copy that spell twice. Instead, you may choose targets for the copies. This card, you get both of these, right? Flashback is literally jumpstart, but you don't have to discard a card. So you get to Increasing Vengeance, copy something, you can flash it back later. This is probably a card that won't see a ton of play, but it could also prop up some kind of combo deck. Again, the lack of Desperate Rituals and Pyretic Rituals and stuff like that in this format could notably keep this card from being playable. Yeah, notably this synergizes with the new Magecraft keyword that's coming. So, Primal Command. Another sweet one here. Choose 2. You get 2 of them, chat. Target player gains 7. Put target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library. Search your library for any creature card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. This is technically another Stone Rain, chat. Non-creature permanent includes lands. Turn 1 Land War Elves. Stone Rain you. Mutate Sawtusk onto my Land War Elf. Stone Rain you. Primal Command. Put your land on top of my deck and flip you off at the same time. Listen, chat, I'm not saying that the red-green Ponza deck is gonna be good, but I am saying that people are gonna register it, so put some more lands in your deck, okay? The utility on this card, to set a low bar, I think this card is better than something like Stone Rain, because this card has flexibility on it where when destroying a land isn't good, this card does other things. There's going to be times where you gain 7 against aggro, and it's going to be the difference between winning and losing. You're going to find your sweet card, it's going to be random main deck, graveyard hate, etc. So I expect this card to honestly see some amount of play, and I expect it to see meme play in something like red-green land destruction. Ponza is red-green land destruction. For the Magic Zoomers out there at home, Google it. Oh, MTG Bot's got the hookup there, yeah. There you go. Tainted Pack. We got the Taint, chat. Exile the top card of your library. You may put that card into your hand unless it has the same name as another card exiled this way. Repeat this process until you put a card into your hand or exile 2 cards with the same name, whichever comes first. So you could technically build a combo deck around this where you get to guaranteed exile your entire deck. If you have all one-ofs except for 2 copies of Tainted Pack, yeah, you could technically get to play it with Literary. And this is basically like a Demonic Tutor if you're lucky. I don't know, this one could go either way. I don't hate this because it's a decent Hail Mary card. At a minimum, you can trip it. So this is one where I wouldn't be surprised if it sees play, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it just kind of flubs. Teferi's Protection. Until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. While they're phased out, they're treated as though they don't exist. They phase in before you untap during your next untap step. This is not quite White Time Walk, but also kind of White Time Walk, right? Your opponent takes a turn, but they kind of can't do stuff to you. It's like a Super Fog. Super Fog's a really good comparison. And this is notably, this is a Super Fog that does not get stopped by Questing Beast, and this can synergize with your own things. You can cast this spell in response to your own Wrath of God. Cast Wrath of God, Teferi's Protection in response, phase my board out, my creatures come back next turn, you lose your board. You could follow the Thran, Teferi's Protection in response. Obviously, these are expensive things, but to set a low bar, this is a flexible fog that doesn't get Questing Beast or Bone Crusher Gianted. Your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. Listen, chat, I have a really good flowchart for if protection from everything stops something. Ask yourself a simple question. Does protection from everything stop Stomp? Stomp is a thing, so protection from everything stomps it. It's a very good system, chat. Is what you're asking about a thing? You have protection from it. All right, so next card. Compulsive Research. Target player draws 3 cards, then discards 2 cards unless they discard a land. It's another one that could go either way. This is a powerful piece of card selection, but it's also being added to the format at the same time as lots of other powerful pieces of card selection, like Faithless Looting and Brainstorm and stuff like that. So pre-looting and Brainstorm, I think I would have said, yeah, I expect this card to see play. Like, some people are mentioning Phoenix, but I honestly don't know that I expect this card to be better than, like, Tormenting Voice and other cheaper cards. Because remember, Phoenix explicitly cares about you casting 3 spells in a turn. So I really don't think that this card is likely to see a lot of play there, in large part because it's a sorcery. So if this was an instant, I think it could maybe keep up with those other more efficient spells. But the fact this is also a sorcery, I think this one, I wanted to mention it because this card is like a background and a pedigree, but I also think this one's probably edged out for the most part. I just wanted to touch on it. Yeah, things like Cathartic Reunion and Tormenting Voice are probably better in Phoenix, in my opinion. Doomblade. I can now say dies to Doomblade without someone being like, actually, Jeff, Doomblade is not legal. Doomblade is legal, chat. Is Doomblade better than Heartless Act? Probably not. I feel like this is a very reasonable sideboard card, but I think generically this is probably worse than like Heartless Act, Eliminate, Blood Chief's Thirst. Won't be surprised if it sees sideboard play, but also kind of expect it to be worse. Yeah, I expect it to be worse than some of the other pieces of point removal that you can main deck in the moment. Gift of Estates. When an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for 3 Plains cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. This notably does not say basic Plains. This can draw you cycling lands, even. Yeah, you play this, you're on the draw. Your opponent made their 3rd land drop on the play. You cast this turn 3. Before you play your land drop, you draw 3 cards, you get to put land into play. So, yeah, this is the anti-Stone Rain technology, chat. You're gonna get Stone Rained a lot. This is a card that's okay against it. Grape Shot. I think if you asked me to rank the Storm cards in Historic from best to worst, I expect this one to be the worst, I think. I expect this to be worse than Weather the Storm, too. That being said, we talked about Mizzix's Mastery, and there could be a sweet mono-red Storm deck that this card enables. So I think both Tendrils, I'm expecting both Tendrils and Grape Shot to be kind of mediocre whatever, but I think Mizzix's Mastery puts Grape Shot slightly better than, maybe it's better than Tendrils. Yeah, I think you're right. Sorry, I misspoke. I expect this one to be slightly better than Tendrils because of Mizzix's Mastery. Yeah, you also have things like Briggy and Stormkin, but there could be some kind of mono red Storm that puts this card. Harmonize. Maybe. There's a good chance that this is outclassed by other cards in the set. Other cards not in the set, other cards in the format that generate more card advantage. Worth touching on. This will be a sweet cube card at least, but I wanted to say, hey, this is something to think about in the format. This is maybe a card you can play. Good chance it's worse than like Planeswalkers and stuff, but this is one that you'll want to play some games with, I think, before just writing it off. The Fabricator, thanks for the 7 months. I appreciate it. Welcome back. Corrosive Grip. Destroy target artifact or enchantment with split second. No spells in response. Step up from Naturalize under the right conditions. Blue-white control. Often has things like Shark Typhoon and other things like that. Yeah, this kills an oven before your opponent can activate it. It kills a Shark Typhoon and doesn't get counterspelled. So I think there's a chance that this sees some amount of sideboard play. This card existing will dictate the timing of spells that people cast. So that's nice. Putrify. Okay removal spell. Destroy target artifact or creature. Kind of contextual as to when this card is better than other removal spells. Might be fine, might not be fine. Who knows? Regrowth. Again, wanted to mention this one because it has a pedigree in the format, but I think I expect this to be worse than is it Bagala? What's the 3-mana regrowth that can play as a land? Bala Ged. Yeah, Bala. I think regrowth is worse than Bala Ged recovery. On average, you can play this as a land. I think the upcharge of 1 mana to have the flexibility to be a land when you need it probably makes this better. But again, regrowth has a history, so I wanted to touch on it and at least give a thought as to why I think it's probably worse than this. Tendrils of Agony. This one, thinking on it and based on stuff in chat, I think this is probably the worst Storm card. I misspoke when I said Grape Shot earlier. Maybe gonna be okay. You know, this is a card that we could put in our Mind's Desire deck to be a copy of something that we can hit with Mind's Desire to actually end the game when we're storming off. But other than that, you know, you only have to have generated 8-9 storm count to kill most people with this card. Yeah, this could be another card. You know, we talked about Mizzix's Mastery. Perhaps Tendrils could be good with that as well. Yeah, maybe it's good in a Bolas to Citadel Storm deck. I could see that too. Yeah, this could be decent. Could be decent in Citadel Storm. Tezzeret's Gambit. The implications of this card are scarier than the card itself, which is that Arena's going to support Phyrexian mana. Which feels like Arena supports Phyrexia mana is scarier than, like, I don't know that this card in particular is, like, this card's not busted. This card might not even be playable, but it means like surgical extraction or apostle or birthing pod. Holy gosh. Can we get birthing pod in historic? Steric. Oh, I can start asking for birthing pod now. That's all I need in life, Chad. Give me the pod. I need the pod. Like I said, I'm not mentioning this card because of it particularly being good. Sure, maybe it's mentionable with Nissa, but yeah, birthing pod. Other good Phyrexian mana cards. It's not like, oh, they don't want to put those in historic because Phyrexian mana is going to be complicated to program. It's going to be, oh, we have Phyrexian mana and the world is our oyster. We can have those in historic anthologies. Pod might be a turn 2 kill in historic. I mean, you cast Pod on turn 2 and then you can't do anything else with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pod is a turn 3 kill in historic. I don't think turn 2 is possible. Despite all his rage, there is still just an Urza in a cage. Can't be countered. This is kind of a cute Timmy card. You can kick it for 11 mana to deal 10. I don't know. Probably worse than Banefire. Kind of a neat design though, you know, if there's a tempo deck in the format. You know, we talked about Memory Lapse earlier. You want a red card that's an instant that can kill target annoying tempo creature thing. Wasn't this in Jumpstart? It doesn't say it's currently historic legal, so if it was in Jumpstart, it wasn't printed on Arena already. But yeah, I could see this could maybe be playable. Maybe. It was an MH1. There you go. Now, someone said not all of the archives are up on Scryfall. So let's do a double check here and make sure I didn't miss any. I intentionally skipped over a number of them because I didn't think they were worth talking about. So if I didn't talk about one in this video, that's because I don't think it's a big deal, or it's a card that was already legal, or it's a card that's banned. So there are 63 of these. 7 of them are not legal. Channel, Swords to Plowshares, Counterspell, Lightning Bolt, Channel, Natural Order. These cards are not legal. And we've been talking for almost an hour now. Yeah, Time Warp was the one that was missing, and we talked about that. To give closing thoughts, I tweeted about this too, but there's been a lot of people that have been complaining about cards that are legal and cards that aren't, etc. And I actually think the people that decided which cards are legal and which ones aren't actually did a pretty good job with all this. I don't know if it's fair to call them bad faith, but I've heard a lot of bad comparisons where people have said, Jeff, Fatal Push is legal. Why can't we have Bolt and Swords to Plowshares? If you think that's a good comparison, you haven't played enough Historic, especially with black removal. I think if you asked me to rank black removal spells in Historic, Fatal Push wouldn't make my top 3. It maybe makes my top 5, but the lack of good Revolt enablers combined with the number of Planeswalkers in the format, I actually think Bloodchief Thirst on average would be my pick for the best black removal spell. And if you wanted specifically instant speed, Heartless Act would be my pick. So something that I think enough people don't consider. And this is why I actually think the list of cards that are getting into Historic via the Mystical Archives is good, is that formats where answers are worse tend to be more diverse than formats where answers are better. And to explain what I mean by that is every time the threats that are playable in a format are dictated by what answers are playable. And Swords to Plowshares, for example, means that any creature that costs 3, 4, 5 mana that doesn't get an Enters Play effect, basically it just isn't good enough, because the tempo swing that you're going to lose from getting your creature plowed for 1 mana and it not doing much isn't worthwhile a lot of the time. Same thing with Lightning Bolt, right? Like, Lightning Bolt says that things that have 3 toughness or less that cost 3+ mana, if they don't have an Enters Play effect, they're generally just not going to be good enough. And while I think there are some cards like Faithless Looting that could go either way, I could see them being fine, but I also could see them being busted. Again, if you want the full thoughts on all of those, it'll be, this whole video will be up on YouTube when we talk through the most playable ones at the beginning. I think in general, the people that made the choices here made reasonable ones. I'm interested to see how it plays out. Again, if you're excited to play with these cards, you want to play in a kind of more laid-back tournament thing, the Hooglandia Open Series will be returning on April 17th, 2 days after these cards release. I'm going to be playing a ton of Historic on stream on the 15th and the 16th after it releases to try out new ideas for things people can see before you have to test them themselves. And then the community is going to be playing a tournament here as well. Signups are not open for that yet. We'll probably open them early next month, and I'll tweet them out and tag people in the subs Discord. But if you haven't seen those or played in one before, coverage of the last one that we did is up on my website here. They're $5 to play in. They're open entry tournaments. They're a lot of fun. The prize structure is pretty flat, so think of it as kind of more of a big FNM than something cutthroat. Like, for example, in our last Historic tournament, the most played deck out of 140 people only had like 4% of the field. So more laid back setting where people are just trying to have a good time, and it's a lot of fun. And there's a ton of cards in here that are going to be sweet to build around and brew with. So out of curiosity, how do you want Phyrexian Mana to work at MTG? I have no idea. I am not a user interface designer. It's not my job to figure out how to make something like that work elegantly. Hopefully, however they implemented it works well, but I don't personally have opinions on how I think that should work. Listen, chat, the world would be a better place if more people had enough brains to say, I'm not qualified to give you an answer on that. That's not my problem to solve. Let's let people who are qualified answer that question. All right, so we've chatted here for an hour and 5 minutes. This is all going to go up on my YouTube channel as well. I mentioned that a second ago. So if you want to see it start to finish, it'll all be up there later tonight. Going to be a few hours. I'm going to play some more Nier Automata. We're like 4.5 hours into that. It's been fun. on my PlayStation 5. I posted, just to plug before we change over,